Hello, everybody. Howdy. How's everybody doing today? Hope everybody's doing well. My day's been okay. I guess I can't really complain too much. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just been kind of boring. I kind of came home and laid down and slept for like what felt like an hour, but was actually only like probably like 10 minutes. And that was my excitement. That was about everything I did except go to work pretty much. But you know what? Isn't that just life in general? God, that actually kind of made me sad saying that out loud. Oh God, isn't that life in general? Just going to work and then going home and not having the energy to do anything. We love to see it here, folks. Oh man, don't you just you love it. You love it, don't you? So anyway, I hope everybody's had a really good day. Tonight we're going to be explaining some more of my universe that I've been building. And I have my bottle of water here that's all ready to go, because I'm going to need it. I might get like a beer or something, because maybe that'll help me explain more if I get like a little boozed up or something. I don't know. Yeah, okay, so I'm not going to lie to you guys, okay? Last time I did a creative writing stream, I had it pretty much all figured out what I was going to be doing. I pretty much had it all figured out, what was going to go down, what was going to happen, what I was going to talk about. This one, not really so much. I haven't really given too much thought into it, honestly. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about. I figured I would just start, and then that would probably, the ideas would flow from there. That's kind of what I was figuring. So just kind of a, excuse me. Made a little more tired than I thought. But yeah, just kind of just seeing like where the conversation kind of ends up. Because of that, it might be a little shorter today. Might be a little bit more on the shorter side. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Yeah, that's about really it. I don't really have any like announcements or anything. I guess real quick while I'm waiting for the ad break to show up, I'm gonna look up real quick what I got going on tomorrow. Oh my God, I don't have a stream tomorrow. I don't have a stream tomorrow. Okay. But I'm returning Thursday with Doom Watch. There we go. That's what it is. That's what we're looking for. Yeah, I don't have anything planned tomorrow. There's no stream listed at all tomorrow. So, I would say I'm going to go out and I'm going to, like, go hiking or something like that. But in reality, it's probably going to be raining or something. And I'll probably just end up going to the grocery store because I have nowhere else I really go. I have nowhere else to go, man. I don't really go anywhere. I don't really go to bars or... I've only ever been to, like, a bar twice. And it was the same bar. So, it was the same fucking bar. So I don't think it counts. And those were the only times I ever went to bars. And... No, it was twice. It was twice, that's right. Because I went one time with my best friend. And then I went another time with my brother. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and it was the same bar each time. Well, it's funny because there's like a bar like pretty close to me where I live. It's just a town over, which is like a 5-minute drive. And I was talking to my brother, and I was talking to my brother, and I was like, yeah, I've been thinking about going to bars and stuff. You know what I mean? And he's like, don't go to the one in next town over. Don't go to that one. And I'm like, why? He's like, it's ass, bro. You don't want to go. He's like, it's like literally ass. You don't want to go there. Okay. Alright, so, the ad break's over. Let's go ahead and let's switch to my special creative writing stream screen. Yeah, so as you can see, the title of this lecture, I hope you'll be taking notes, is, I don't know, some random stuff I'd figure I'd just start talking. And isn't that a big fucking mood? Okay, so, well, I guess to be fair, there was one thing I kind of thought about while I was at work today that might be kind of a starter for it. That's an L. That's not colon? Is that? Yeah, I think that's a colon. I almost looked it up. I almost looked up colon on Google. And that probably would not have been a good idea on stream. Like, you're trying to look up, like, a grammatical thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, sorry, chat, here's a picture of someone's butthole on stream. Oops. Okay, section 1. Let's talk about Dagnor. So, you might be asking yourself, alright, Malphas, what the fuck is Dagnor? Well, Dagnor is a planet. Ooh. I know, real original. Or, I guess since we discussed it last time, realm. Planet realm is interchangeable. You can use both. You can use both names. Okay, so that's what Dagnor is physically. But here's the thing. There's a little more to it than that. In fact, actually, I think Dagnor is one of the more, like, important, like, planets / realms in kind of, like, the deep whole lore I've been kind of building. Mostly because of its inhabitants known as... I know, real original, Dagnorians. Which are essentially, let's just say for now, essentially, they're like goat people. They're like that. They look kind of like what we would call goats, essentially. And what made Dagnorians very interesting is that a lot of their society was actually based around black magic. Now, the thing with Dagnor is around the time when the Dagnorians existed, it was an Earth-like planet. It was very Earth-like. There was all kinds of different biomes, all kinds of ecosystems and organisms that inhabited the planet, right? Including the Dagnorians. And the Dagnorians based a lot, and I mean a lot of their society, off of black magic, which is just essentially chaos. At least in the lore for, like, that I've been building, it's essentially just chaos. Chaos magic, in a way. So the Dagnorians had a warrior demigod king. And if you're familiar somewhat with demonology, you might probably know this name. Because legit, like, this is gonna make a lot of... Probably not gonna make a lot of sense, actually. But this is just what I've been building. So the warrior demigod king of the Dagnorians was named Baphomet. Like I said, if you know anything about demonology, that name might sound familiar. Baphomet is supposedly like this being that was worshipped by the Knights Templar. And now it's more or less associated as like kind of like a demon. I think that's how it's seen today. Yeah. So anyway, we got Baphomet. That's the warrior demigod king of the Dagnorians. So, immortal. Actually, you know what? It's not immortal. Let's not say immortal. Just, let's say extended vitality. That sounds more apt. Because Baphomet wasn't really immortal. Just more kind of can live a very, 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 very long time. Let's just say that. And the warrior and Baphomet essentially wanted, and this is gonna be a big one here. Baphomet wanted more power / immortality. And so what Baphomet decided to do was he went to essentially like the greatest like wizards, the greatest chaos magicians, whatever you want to call them, in like on Dagnor. And he told them to make him a spell that would essentially increase his strength tenfold, 100-fold, you know, what have you, and make him effectively immortal so he could rule over the domain forever. So the wizard set to work. And this spell is going to be important later, so trust, or it's actually going to be important right now. So the wizard set to make this spell, right? And they began working on it. And they had some early success. They had early success in tests in terms of strength. So basically, they made this spell, and they're testing it on, like, essentially just normal Dagnorians. Just pull a random guy off the street or something, and just test it on him, you know? In, like, a controlled setting, obviously. These are pretty much scientists. They want to do everything in a controlled environment. And so they tested on these people, and they found it did increase strength a lot. However, it came with one glaring issue. Now, if you remember last stream, I said that in general, a general kind of rule across this multiverse is if you are a mortal person or not a god or anything like that, and you go out of your way to try and make yourself immortal in some way or increase your strength artificially using like a lot of magic, it comes with the cost of what I call humanity. And what I mean when I'm saying humanity is like the ability to distinguish yourself, the ability to distinguish others as people. Basically, you become ruthless. Let's say that. You become ruthless, violent, like not caring about others, you become selfish. You pretty much just become effectively kind of like a zombie, only you know you're not spreading an infection, you're just fucking angry all the time. So these were the early tests, and the wizards were not able to fully like get this out of the system, no matter how hard they tried, to like prevent the loss of humanity, like loss of senses and everything from happening. They couldn't do it. So they were unable to remove this. They couldn't do it. And so Baphomet went back to the wizards after they had not succeeded, and essentially was asking them what was going on. And the wizards told Baphomet, you know, we're trying to do this, we're trying to make this spell, but every time we test it on somebody, they go violent, they go into a rage. Their strength increases, but it doesn't actually make them immortal, nor does it actually, like, allow them to control this strength. So, what does Baphomet do? He doesn't accept this answer. In fact, I did not spell that at all correctly. So Baphomet doesn't accept this answer. And so what does Baphomet do? He actually kind of tries to reason with them. Tries to make some logic. Baphomet says he's a demigod. And because of that, it won't affect him the same way. So essentially, Baphomet is essentially telling them, all those people that you tested it on were mere mortals. I am not a mere mortal. I am a demigod. It will have to affect me differently. I will be able to control this. I'll be able to control my strength. I'll be able to keep my humanity and everything. I can do this. You have to try it on me. And so, against their better wishes, at his behest, is that what it? Is that what it is? Wait, is that actually a word, behest? It must be. I don't even think I used that word right. Okay, you know what? Let's just say request. There we go. And so, what do you think happens, chat? What do you think happens to this demigod warrior king, who has been asked to try and for his wizards to like try an experimental spell on him to essentially increase his strength? It had the same effect. It had the exact same effect on him. Only much more increased, you could say. You see, he was kind of right in the sense that as a demigod, it affected him a little differently from the mortals. But not in a good way. It essentially increased his strength a lot more. And let's write that down. Increase his strength more than it would a mortal. Baphomet actually grew. He grew, like, probably up to, like, I would say probably like 15, 20 feet. He grew that tall. And his strength increased more than 100-fold, probably like close to 1,000-fold. And he went into a rage, a blind rage. He could not be controlled. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this was the creation of something outside the divine hierarchy. Oh yeah, you didn't think I was going to bring that back, did you? No, this all leads back into it. This all leads back into it, chat. This was the creation of something outside the divine hierarchy. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to the corrupted. Or, you can also call it the corruption. God, I am not doing good spelling tonight. Holy shit. So, the corruption is what the spell has now become known as. Essentially, the corruption is a type of chaos magic that essentially increases your strength several times fold, depending on like what kind of your power is on the divine hierarchy and everything. And it essentially comes at great cost. Now, there's a lot of theories about the corruption that we'll probably get into in a moment, but let's just focus squarely on Baphomet at the moment, because Baphomet was the first. He was the first of these new kind of group of beings called the corrupted. And what did Baphomet go and do? Well, he was in a blind rage, and he was surrounded by mortals that could not stop him. So, essentially, they were fucked. What the fuck happened here? Why is he doing that? Why are you doing that? So, essentially... Oh, you're gonna play this game with me? Okay. Alright, no. They're not doing this. Yeah, we'll just do this then. Man, fuck you. Okay, now it's working. Alright, whatever. It's fine. Okay, so... Baphomet went on a rampage. A rampage so large, in fact, that the entire planet of Dagnor could never hope to recover from it. Baphomet literally destroyed an entire society and pretty much an entire planet, all for his selfish gain, essentially. To be fair, he did get what he wanted in the end, but it came at the cost of his sanity, his humanity, stuff like that. Dagnoranity? Is that what you would call that? I don't know, anyway. So essentially, Baphomet went on a rampage, and what eventually ended up happening was the last of the powerful wizards essentially got together and managed to trap him using their powerful magic. essentially they built this almost impenetrable container, and they just flung him into space. So Baphomet literally just went from like destroying an entire planet to just being flung right into space. Unfortunately, at that point, it was too late to save Dagmar. And unfortunately, unlike a lot of the other like kind of races I've talked about in this kind of like explanation, like my multiverse and everything, the Dagnorians were not at the point yet where they could space travel necessarily. They understood like the ability to like travel between like time and space and dimensions, and in some ways they were able to do it, but not super effectively. And so they were pretty much stuck on their planet, which was dying, and they essentially went extinct. The Dagnorians no longer exist in the lore. They are an ancient species that once inhabited Dagnor that no longer exists. The only thing left of them is their ruins and their scriptures and their, well, just the lives that you can tell just by looking around, pretty much. That's all that's left of the Dagnorians. Well, to be fair, I guess Baphomet's also out there. So what became of Baphomet? What became of Baphomet? This is a good question right here. Well, at some point, he crossed some kind of dimensional threshold. Now, he was in space for an ungodly amount of time. We're talking billions upon billions upon billions of years that he was floating there, essentially trapped in this container that he couldn't get out of. And there were legends, supposedly, of Baphomet landing on different planets and essentially wreaking havoc. No one knows if these are true or not. But it does kind of suggest that at some point Baphomet was kind of able to control whether he was able to land on a planet, if he could get out or not. But nobody really knows for sure. But at some point, Baphomet crossed a dimensional threshold. No one's quite sure what caused it. It's more than likely the same event that triggered Hell to essentially be thrown in between dimensions. Now, I don't know if I talked about this or not in the previous stream. But let's do like a brief side. Let's do a brief aside here. Let's talk about Hell. Let's talk about Hell real quick. The place that I'm probably going to end up going. So, Hell exists between dimensions. It essentially is a world that exists between, like, the folds of dimensions. And originally, Hell was a normal Earth-like planet. And I feel like I might have explained this a little bit in the last episode, but I'll just go ahead and, just explain it a little more. So Hell was a normal Earth-like planet at some point that essentially housed more Atlassians. Remember the Atlassians? I talked about them last stream. The Atlassians were essentially what became humans. They looked exactly like humans and everything. Well, after the collapse of the Fourth Republic, which we will probably get into eventually at some point, either this stream or the next stream, the Atlassians were spread out across the multiverse. I'm sure you might remember that from the last stream as well. And what this essentially led to is them often repopulating old colonies and stuff that they once had. And this planet that became Hell was one of them. Now, at some point, let's say after colonization, Hell had a catastrophe. Hell had this big catastrophe. Essentially, it was thrown between dimensions. It was thrown into this pocket by some unknown means. There's a few theories that I have. Mostly, I say that because I haven't gotten that far in the storyline yet. At least, designing the storyline myself. So, I don't really know exactly what happened. But let's just say Hell was thrown between dimensions because of some big event that led to it. And this essentially led to Hell becoming a wasteland. Scroll down a little bit because you guys can't see that. Hell becoming a wasteland slash filling with lava slash fire. Hey Maya, hello. Thank you for the nut. How you doing today? I'm sitting here like rambling about like the multiverse I've been building. So that's essentially the explanation for how Hell became the way it was. And of course, I don't think... Did I discuss the origin of demons? I don't know. I don't think I did. Play a new Overwatch season. Ooh, okay. I don't play Overwatch, so I don't know if it... I don't know if that's any good or not, but honestly, sounds exciting either way. So, I guess this is another aside within the aside. Demons. Let's talk about how demons were made. Alright. Are you ready for this? There's gonna be some big deep lore here. We're getting really into the deep lore of this universe now. So let's just rip the band-aid off right now. Especially if you've seen the last episode where I was talking about my multiverse and everything. I kind of said that Atlassian spread out across the multiverse and essentially became like different species, including humans. Well, demons did too. Demons are an Atlassian descended species as well. Yes. Let's just take a moment, take that in for a moment. How does that work? Essentially, the Atlassians, after the fall of the Fourth Republic, repopulated this planet that they colonized at some point. And then the catastrophe happened. And what this essentially led to was this brand new environment that these essentially humans were thrown into without much preparation, essentially. They had to essentially learn to survive on the fly. And this led to a kind of evolution taking place. As resources became more scarce, the Atlassian descendants on that planet became more selfish. They began to hoard more of the resources. They began to conscript other demons, at this point demons in air quotes, put them in air quotes, into their armies to essentially fight for them. And this is where you begin to see the lords come in, the demon lords and everything. They begin to take shape here. And essentially, the Atlassians morph to their environment. They become selfish beings that want nothing more than to keep most of their resources. The very scarce resources, the very scarce food, the very scarce water, the very scarce, like, rare elements that you can find. And that's how you get demons, essentially. The demon lords take shape. They begin to, like, the whole, like, body begins to change as well. It just becomes, like, a whole thing. But that's essentially, like, the surface level version of demons. Okay, so now we're about where we can get back into Baphomet. So let's get back into Baphomet. So when we left off Baphomet just a few minutes ago, he was floating in the middle of space for billions upon billions of years, and he had wandered through some dimensional threshold and was now between dimensions. Baphomet was orbiting Hell, essentially. Baphomet began to orbit Hell. And eventually, Baphomet plummeted to Hell. Baphomet essentially began to plummet to Hell and landed. And of course, Lucifer and the demons are like, what the fuck is this? You know, it's because this random meteorite just shows up out of goddamn nowhere. And like, they don't get meteorites there. They're literally in the middle of a dimensional space. Like, they're in between dimensions. They shouldn't be getting that kind of stuff. Or at least they would very rarely. So this thing lands in Hell, and Lucifer goes to figure out what's going on. And out of this rock, this giant rock, comes Baphomet. Baphomet comes out, and of course, as we mentioned, he's in a rage. He's enraged all the time, because he's lost his senses. And he begins destroying hell. Yep, Baphomet begins to destroy hell. And he is too powerful for Lucifer to even control. Now, at this point, I think it should be mentioned that hell had essentially been fleshed out to how we think of it. A place of torment for sinners who essentially sinned in their lifetime. And this was an agreement between Lucifer and Yahweh, or God. And essentially, they talked it out and they worked out this kind of deal. Where hell would essentially become the place where all the bad naughty people went. To essentially be, in air quotes, tortured for the rest of time, because it's not really for the rest of time, but that's like kind of like a little aside there as well. That's an aside within an aside again. We'll leave that for now. Maybe I'll like flesh out hell a little more next time. So essentially, Baphomet coming in destroying hell isn't really good for either side. So Yahweh himself, let's write this down. Yahweh himself comes down to hell. So essentially, Yahweh and Lucifer team up again, and you can tell they don't like each other. They hate each other. They hate that they have to work together for this. But in order to keep the arrangement going, this is what they have to do. So, what ends up happening is Lucifer and Yahweh, let's write this down, lure Baphomet to the far north. Now, the thing about the far north of hell, at least in the canon I've been building, is it's still pretty icy. Essentially, like, most of hell is like this scorched wasteland that's on fire and there's lava coming up from the core and everything. It's not a good place to be. But when you go to the far north and the far south as well of the planet, you reach a lot of ice. Like a fuck ton of ice. Like, let me use a euphemism. Let me use this, like, metaphor that, like, a friend of mine once said. It's like every single ice god, demon, like, goddess, like, spirit, all had a laxative party and took a shit in the north of hell. Yes, my friend actually said that, by the way. Not the north of hell part, but it was obviously for, like, where we lived at the time. So, yeah. But that's essentially what the north of hell is like. And so, Yahweh and Lucifer lured Baphomet up there. And they essentially lure him into a cave where they corner him and they conceal him in ice. Baphomet is fully concealed in ice in the far north of hell. That cave is then blocked off and it's essentially forbidden to ever go in there. Now, obviously, there was a big battle during this. I'm kind of skipping over some details. Both Lucifer and Yahweh fought Baphomet. This was a large battle that occurred. But I decided to just kind of skip over it for the time being because we need to get to some, like, other stuff regarding Baphomet. I've been talking for, like, 36 minutes. Holy shit. So Baphomet remains for thousands of years before some people come to show up. And they find him by complete accident, not knowing what they were getting into. So let's make this section 2. This will probably be a brief section. Baphomet and who found him. So I've been kind of like having like a style of like just ripping off the bandage with these. So you might be asking, who was it that eventually found Baphomet all the way in hell? Before you answer me, you're actually not right. We're not talking about Malphas at the moment. I think we talked about Malphas last episode, actually. But yeah, so no, I wasn't involved in this. But do you know who did? Let's set the scene here. It's the 1930s. Okay. It's the 1930s on Earth. It is a strange time to be alive. It is the Great Depression era. There is this distinct rise of authoritarianism across the world. It is a very strange time to be alive. So, in the 1930s, in the Himalayan mountains, who goes there? In the middle of the 1930s, who goes to the Himalayan mountains to look for stuff? We got the Germans. Yes, this is where this story ultimately leads to. Do not click off yet. This is literally like, trust me, just follow this for a little bit. Just follow this. So, the Germans are there on expedition to find artifacts that they can misinterpret, obviously, to fit their narrative regarding their ideas of humanity. Let's put it like that. Let's put it like that, because they were horrible people. Okay, wait, hang on. Let me actually pause. I was gonna say, I know everyone knows what I'm saying, but just for accuracy's sake, let's pause right here for a sec and let me clarify. I mean, I don't know if I can say on Twitch, the party in charge of Germany at that time were horrible people, and were wanting to find these artifacts to spin their own narrative. There we go. That's much better. That's much better place. I think that does a much better, more clear, concise job. So they go up to the Himalayan mountains, and they find a large, sprawling complex, a large city. So what is this city they find? Oh, it's Shangri-La. Let's just say it. At least in the canon, this is Shangri-La, which is a kind of leftover of, like, original Atlassian colonization of Earth. Because, yes, before the humans showed up on Earth, the Atlassians were there millions of years before them. And that's where they stayed for quite a while until I think I have her at, like, the classical era of, like, is when, like, the remaining, like, Atlassian civilizations kind of start going away for various reasons. And Shangri-La was one of them, in the Himalayan mountains. And the German researchers find it, and within these mountains, within the city, they find an ancient portal. This ancient portal is something that these ancient races use to essentially travel across dimensions very easily without having to waste fuel reserves for their ships. Now, to be fair, though, it did take quite a bit of power to run these portals as well. But it was, like, a little cheaper, than having to, like, take a ship. But to be fair, in all fairness, you can't really make a portal big enough to fit a ship through it. So, yeah, that's the thing. So, they find this ancient portal buried underneath the city. And through testing, they activate it. They managed to activate it. Now, keep in mind, at this point, they'd already built, like, an entire, like, research station and everything there. They had troops there and everything. They were, like, really, like, settling in for a long time to sit and research this. And then they walk through it. Now, if you remember what I said earlier, the Atlassians had already colonized the planet that became Hell before. Like, around the same time they were doing it with Earth. And then they recolonized it, like, millions of years later, after the fall of the Fourth Republic. Yeah, keep in mind, like, I don't think I ever said this in the last episode, but these Republic time spans are not like decades, they're not centuries, they're not millennia, they're millions of years. They're literally entire, like, epochs of time, essentially. Epochs? Epochs? I don't know what the proper term is. And that is, like, essentially the kind of time scale we're talking about. Like, that's how long a lot of these, like, nations are lasting here. Like, these interplanetary, intergalactic, like, nations are lasting. That's how long. So there was a portal already in. And so, this portal comes out in a ruin that has long been buried underneath the ice of hell in the far north. You already know where this is going. I just said it. So they dig their way through the rubble. I used the wrong there. Way to go. And they eventually find Baphomet's chamber. Now, the thing with Baphomet is, even though he was completely concealed in ice, locked away, essentially they threw away the key to make sure he never got out again, he was still conscious. In air quotes, obviously, because he lost his humanity. In there. Baphomet still had influence in there. And the thing with Baphomet is, he's able to influence mortals. So let me write that down. Baphomet can influence mortals. And he was still awake under the ice. So this means that when these German researchers walked through and essentially looked up at this large figure entombed in ice in this large chamber, Baphomet got to them. Or essentially began to influence them. Began to fill their heads with images, ideas. And they took them, and of course, these researchers took them back when they went back to the research station, when they went back through the portal. And soon, oh my god, what am I doing? And soon, more researchers go through. And obviously they're going through because it's like, guys, we just found this fucking giant goat person, like literally entombed in the ice in this weird realm that we don't know what it is. They literally had no clue they were in hell yet. To be fair, they probably figured out sooner rather than later, but... Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway. Where was I? Oh yeah, okay. So, more research to go through, and essentially, this thing is starting to spread like a plague. This influence. Baphomet's really beginning to influence these people, these researchers, you know? And what becomes of this research station? What becomes of it? What do you think? You have, like, practically a demon exercising influence over a bunch of people, enclosed in a small area. It essentially becomes a cult. It becomes like a little cult area. And essentially... Let me write this down. Station in... Oh, man, what year was it? I don't remember. I think it was I think I wrote 1942. So the Germans lost contact with the Himalayan station in 1942, according to the lore. And it's all because they all fell under the influence of Baphomet. That's essentially what it is. And as of right now, that pretty much about covers most of the lore I have. So what became of that station? Well, I mean, to be fair, in all fairness, that is kind of something I was working on like a few years ago, and I kind of forgot like what a lot of it was. But from what I can remember, if I were to go into it, it would take a lot more like explaining about stuff. Which, to be fair, that's what we're here for. You know, you're literally here to listen to me ramble about this shit. But I think that will be a good place to kind of call the whole Baphomet thing for now. It's funny because we started out talking about like, oh, here's Dagnor. You know, here's this one planet that's like really cool, you know, and there's these Dagnorians and they're extinct because their warrior demigod king wizard thing wanted to essentially be strong and immortal, and he destroyed their planet, and now he's in hell, and oh, I forgot to make this bold. I thought I forgot something. Where's the bold? There it is. I'll say this is what I need to bold. In bold. There we go. So, that's about where we'll end with Baphomet for tonight. I want to talk a little more about some other stuff, though. But let's see. What is it that I want to talk about? I guess I could go over... Yeah, let's do that. So here's what we're going to do. Let's talk about Section 3. Let's take a break from Dagnor and Hell and all that. And let's talk about the era that I've been working on a lot. Like the past, year or so. So the kind of era of the multiverse I've been working on is... the Second Republic era. So, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this big thing that I've been working on. So, the Second Republic refers to the Atlassian Second Republic. Let me write that down. It's the Atlassian Second Republic. Because there was one before this one. The Atlassian Second Republic replaced the Atlassian Empire. Because, yes, there was an empire. I know this is starting to sound like Star Wars. To be fair, though, I did take a lot of inspiration from Star Wars when I was, writing a lot of this and everything. So I guess it kind of makes sense. But, I mean, I kind of try to, put my own twist on it and everything. Try to, make my own unique kind of, spin on the whole tale and everything. But, yeah, let's talk about the Atlassian. Second Atlassian Republic. So the first one, you might be asking, what happened to the first one? What happened to the first Atlassian Republic? Well, it collapsed. It collapsed due to war. Essentially, around the time of the first Atlassian Republic, when the Atlassians were kind of living in their, at pretty much their greatest extent, territory-wise, with, we're talking the First Republic was a republic that spread over several galaxies. So we're talking millions, billions, trillions of planets, And the First Republic essentially fell apart because of invasions from another group, which I talked about last episode, the Polarians, the big, pale humanoid warrior creatures. Warrior race, that's what they were. Essentially, let's just say the Polarians and the Atlassians, in the lore, have a very long history of not really getting along too well. And it really shows in a lot of the rivalry and stuff that I've been building. So, let's make the long story short, because I don't really know too much about the First Republic era. It's one of the eras I haven't actually really sat down and really fleshed out yet. But essentially, the First Republic was this large republic that the Atlassians had. The Polarians, essentially, they went to war with them, and the Atlassians also went to war with several other, ancient races around the same time. It spread over several galaxies, and essentially led to the entire part of the multiverse they were living in becoming uninhabitable. Is everyone with me so far? Okay. That's essentially what happened. So, all the gods of the different ancient races got together to try and make sure that something like that wouldn't happen again. And so, what they ended up doing is they formed a little council in this other planet between dimensions. Not Hell. That's a completely different one. There's a few planets between dimensions here. But they met on this neutral ground, and they essentially formed kind of a council of different ancient race deities and everything to essentially try and make sure that if they were to go to war with each other, because they're probably going to end up fighting, let's be honest, that at the very least they won't, like, destroy the area they live in. At least not completely. Which, to the credit of the council, it mostly worked. So, you know what? Mission accomplished, I guess. But what ended up happening was all the ancient races moved from that little corner of the multiverse to another one. Kind of the same general area where we are, but not necessarily like the exact same. Still like pretty far removed. And so they moved to this area and they spread out across, you know, like several galaxies, all the different ancient races. The only thing with the Alicians is they were pretty much restricted to a little area of like a single galaxy. And keep in mind, when I say little, put that in air quotes, because we're talking like a galactic scale here. This is a long, and I mean long distance, like legitimately. We're talking like unfathomable distances almost. So what essentially ends up happening is Alicians begin to set up their own republic in this new area. But there's a coup. Essentially, there's a bunch of people that don't want to return to the Republican system and essentially want to create their own system. And this coup was pretty much backed by the Polarians in the lore in order to make the Alicians kind of a puppet state almost. Because, believe it or not, the Alicians gave the Polarians a hell of a bloody nose during the first wars. So they didn't want to fight another war with them again. So they essentially like prevented the Republic from forming and essentially installed their own kind of emperor on the throne and created the Alician Empire, which ruled for 100 years, around 100 years. God, I'm horrible at spelling tonight. Alright, so this is the information you need to know. Lasted around 100 years. Around 100 Earth years. Then, there came, after about 100 years of the Empire being a thing, people wanted the Republic back. The old ways back, essentially. Keep in mind, at this point, the gods, like, didn't interfere with this because they kind of thought this was kind of the best case scenario. But after 100 years of being essentially, like, under a tyrannical government, they want to rebel. And so, Alicians rebelled and started a civil war. And in the Civil War, the rebels were backed by powerful people. Other powerful, like, races that existed within the multiverse around the same time. So who were these allies that they were backed by? Well, the rebels were especially backed by the elves. Yes, we're bringing elves into this. I think I might mention in the last episode that there are actually elves in my multiverse I've been working on, and they are an ancient race in the lore. And so, like, the elves come in, and they're ready to supply them weapons. The dwarves also come in and want to supply them weapons too, and essentially help them. And this is and with essentially the backing of these people, as well as their overall collective, like, fighting, they fight a war for 10 years. And results in creation of Second Republic. So now we have the creation of what is the Second Republic. The Second Republic of the Alicians. That spans over essentially the territory of the Empire. And the Empire's not completely gone at this point. They still exist in, like, small pockets and, like, warlords. But after they took over the old Imperial, like, temporary, in air quotes, capital, because the Empire was planning on coming back. Yeah, after they neutered that, after the Republic neutered that, yeah, they weren't going to exist anymore. They were gone. They splintered into, like, several different factions that pretty much held, like, no power, except maybe over, like, a single planetary system or something. That was probably the most that they could muster. Alright, so I want to talk about something that's probably going to be a little boring to a lot of people, but the reason why I mostly want to talk about it is because I sit and think about this a lot. Like, I obsess over this, over all these little details, and that's government. I am not joking when I say I will be at work and I will sit there and I will think about how the hell a government I made works. I'm not joking. Oh wait, I just realized government is on the screen. There you go, now you can see government. Like, alongside, like, kind of like characters and events and stuff, I sit and imagine how the government will work in that universe, in that multiverse I built. Legitimately. Like, honestly, that's probably not really, like, a good thing to obsess over, but I mean, to be fair, it works. So, in order to, like, prevent it from getting, like, too boring, I'll probably, like, keep it relatively short and sweet. Because I feel like if I, like, went into, like, a lot of detail, one, I would bore you, and two, I'd probably be here all night, literally talking about, like, this fake-ass government that I literally made up. Governments work? Hi, Joker. I guess you could say that in the multiverse I've been building. But then again, to be fair, the only reason why they do work is because they have to work for the plot. To be fair. So, yeah. So let's talk about that real quick. So, Second Republic. When we're talking about the Second Allian Republic, it's pretty obvious to tell what it is. It's a republic. Specifically, a democratic republic. Plot continuity do be important. Exactly, Joker. That's exactly how it works. So, the Republic has essentially a federalized government that essentially is split into three different branches. You have your executive. Yeah, we're doing this. Remember government class in high school? Wasn't that fun? I'll try not to, like, harp on about it too much. You have your executive, your legislative, and judicial branches. The executive is ran by a president. I know, real original. The legislator is essentially a parliament, and the judicial system is they're just courts. They're the courts of the Second Republic. So essentially, the president is elected by the people. The parliament is elected by the people as well, the different representatives of the parliament. And obviously, the parliament elects a prime minister, and there's, like, parties and stuff. I won't get too much into that. And then the judicial is made up of, like, judges. You know, they're elected by the people as well. You know, some of them are, like, appointed. It's basic government stuff. So, this is a federal government, so that continues down the line. It goes the same for planetary governments. Planetary governments, essentially. Where, like, the planetary governments will have, like, an executive, which is the governor. They'll have a legislator, which is their own little parliament. And then they'll have their own, like, you know, court system and everything. And that's essentially how the Second Republic runs. Although, to be fair, one thing that does kind of make the Second Republic a little unique in terms of, like, stuff that I've made is each planet is split into several, and I mean several, we're talking about planet-wide scale, provinces. And some of these provinces are really small, some of these provinces are enormous, and each province, of course, has its own, like, little government as well. They have their own, like, council and, like magistrate and stuff like that helps to run things. And the reason why I ultimately elected to do this kind of thing is because I kind of felt that when you're talking about, like, planet-wide stuff, like, on, like, the scale of, like, most sci-fi, like, works have, you don't really, like, see the administration of a planet, I guess. It's just kind of expected that, like, oh yeah, it's part of this, you know, or maybe it'll have, like, a governor or something. But one thing I don't think they really ever think of is planets are large. Planets are huge things that, honestly, most of the people that live on your planet might not actually ever leave that planet. How they might not ever leave, like, the little part of the planet they live on. And so this is kind of where like I thought about the province system, because it's like, okay, so each planet can have like probably hundreds of provinces, and then like I can add like a whole bunch of like interesting ideas in there. Like I can have people like in the stories talking about like regionalism, like do they identify more as like someone from their like province? Do they identify as someone from like their planet? Do they identify as like an Atlassian overall? Honestly, I think it's something that a lot of sci-fi doesn't really like cover, probably because it sounds pretty boring, and in order to make it like actually like work and actually keep the audience's attention, you'd probably really have to sit down and find a way to make it really work and make it feel natural. But yeah, that's kind of just what I thought. That was just kind of like my 2 cents on it, the thoughts about it. It just seemed kind of interesting to me, an interesting idea. You never really like see anything like that in like sci-fi, like kind of like series. So I just thought that was, you know, something like a nice little touch. You know, like have people like being organized into provinces, you know, instead of just this one unified planetary government. That might actually work a little better. So basically, that's a very like rough that's basically a very like rough explanation for how like the Second Republic government works. So let's talk about the military of the Second Republic, the fun stuff. And this is where like a lot of like inspiration from like not just Star Wars but like Warhammer comes in and stuff like that. So the military of the Second Republic is split into 4 different branches. There's the ground forces, which is, it's pretty obvious like what the ground forces are. They're pretty much the army. They're the guys on the ground. There are obviously space forces, which are, you know, the guys in the giant ships and everything. Now, where I think the kind of like sci-fi kind of military I built for this is really unique is there's also 2 other branches that you wouldn't necessarily really consider. One is called maritime forces. And maritime forces are literally like an actual like water navy. Like the Second Republic has a water navy on planets that have like oceans and lakes and stuff. They'll have a water navy, and they essentially do things like patrol. You know, they like they'll kind of take the role of like kind of like a coast guard where they'll like, you know, like help to regulate like, I guess, fishing or whatever the fuck the Coast Guard does. I don't know. I think they also do search and rescue. Yeah, I think that's what I think Coast Guard is mostly law enforcement. I think I got that right. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so that's something I've never really seen like a sci-fi series kind of do. And from what I've heard from people, it's mostly because when you have a space force, you know, what's the point of having an actual navy then? Because you can just like swoop in from literally anywhere and just, you know, you can literally bombard people from space and stuff, all that kind of thing. But I mean, like, I think the maritime forces kind of have their own like little niche that they can fill, where like if there's a island or something that needs taken and like the air defenses are way too strong or something, you know, they could always use the maritime forces. If they can't like launch troops in from like space, they can always launch them from boats. That was just kind of like my thinking from it about it. And then the other thing, there's one more branch, as you know, as you can see. They also have air forces. Now, the air forces are really small. Troops from space? Helldivers? Yeah, you can say that. Yeah, you can say it kind of like that. Although, to be fair, I had this planned out kind of before I knew Helldivers was a thing, so I guess that kind of makes sense. But yeah, so air forces are kind of like the smallest branch. Essentially, they're just like space forces, but they operate mostly like the anti-air stuff, anti-space defenses. They mostly operate off of like... Oh, there's an ad? Okay, alright. I'll just talk about like air forces real quick then. So air forces are mostly based off of like actual air forces, obviously. They operate completely within the atmosphere of a planet. A little boring, I know, but like I said, I was kind of imagining like different niches to fill, and I imagine like with the space forces always constantly like being engaged in space, you know, maybe it would actually help to have like some like actual like in atmosphere based kind of warfare in case they might actually need it. So that's kind of like my thinking with the space or like the air forces. That's kind of like my thinking with it. And as for like the space forces, the space forces are kind of a mix of a few different things. Most of it is like the kind of like Imperial Navy from like Star Wars, or the Republic Navy from Star Wars, kind of stuff like that, where they have like an almost like kind of like Admiralty, and it's almost like arranged like a Navy. But they do have Marines as well that do drop from space. I think considering when I kind of came up with this, and considering at the time I didn't know Helldivers was a thing, I think I modeled it more off of the ODST. I think that's kind of like what I based it heavily off of. But I mean, they don't just launch from like drop pods, they can launch from like, you know, actual like ships. They have like troop carriers that come in from space that can like land, you know, drop their troops and then fly out real quick. Yeah, it's a modern military pretty much. Or a futuristic military, I guess I should say. Fuck, I just spilled water all over my beard. Shit. Oh well, it's alright. So that's basically kind of like the military basic kind of structure. There is a lot more to it than that. Like, I could go into like a lot of detail about how like each planet has like at least like a unit of like ground forces and space forces, at least, and how like in each planet all the military forces, ground forces, space forces, maritime forces, air forces, are all combined in this huge overarching legion or unit called a legion, where they essentially help to like cooperate with each other, like give each other intel, organize battles alongside each other, stuff like that. You know, it really is like heavily based off of like working between the different branches and like trying to figure out like the proper strategies and everything. And then of course there's like all the troops like organized in like a system, like all the planets in a system, and that's called like a Grand Legion. And at that point, yeah, it's getting like, we're getting to like large, really big, like millions of troop level, like kind of like measures pretty much. I mean, we're already doing that with the planets, but like with actually with like space, with like Grand Legions, you're probably talking like billions of troops at once. You can tell where I'm kind of getting the Warhammer vibes. And yeah, I've also been kind of working on like each planet's like kind of legion kind of has like its own kind of unique identity to it. Kind of like the different chapters of like Space Marines from like 40k, or like the different like kind of branches of like the military in 40k, not just like the Space Marines, but also like the Guardsmen and stuff. Thinking maybe some Warhammer. I recently started reading Gaunt's Ghost series. I've never actually heard of that, actually. I might have to look that up later. I'm not really super into Warhammer or anything, but I take a lot of like inspiration from it. I played like Darktide. That was about it. I love Darktide. Wait, there was another Warhammer thing. Vermintide. I played Vermintide 2 as well. But yeah, like literally, I took a lot of inspiration from like 40k recently as well. I'm a book and a half in. Pretty good stuff. Okay. Alright, I might look into that. But yeah, like I could really go into a lot of detail about like different planets and how like each planet has its own like unique identity with the military and stuff. Like for example, like the capital planet, the first planet, they have like the first legion, and like, you know, they have like the first army of the ground forces and everything, and they have this whole holier than thou kind of attitude about how they're like the defenders of the republic and all that. Yeah, they all have their own like unique personality. I have this one planet that's based like heavily off of like the American Old West kind of vibe, and I've always kind of liked to imagine fucking the troops from like that kind of like planet operate almost like cowboys in a sense. I don't know. It's just funny kind of thoughts. I think about a lot of things when I'm at work. I think about this a lot when I'm at work. Let me get a drink. Alright, so I guess the question now is, what should I talk about? Because I think I talked about everything I really want to talk about with the Second Republic, because this is pretty much not really a story per se. I would say the whole era of the Second Republic is more so a setting. Like, honestly, a lot of, like, the universes and stuff that I set up for my, like, multiverse, they're not really stories in and of themselves, or at least most of them aren't. They're more so settings. So actually, I guess I can, like, run down, like, a few of these. So, like, I guess I can run down a few. We'll do section 4 here. Which is settings. So these are some different settings I've been working on. So the one with the Second Republic, put down Second Republic era, it's also called the Atlas Sagas. That's mainly what I call it, because it's meant to be the overarching story of the Atlassian, like, ancient race and everything. So we just talked about that. It's like futuristic, actually. And you know what's funny? You know what's really funny about the Second Republic era? It's billions of years before our time. In the lore, it's literally billions of years ago. Or maybe not, maybe, you could say billions, but it's more like millions, probably millions of years ago. Yeah, in the lore, this whole thing took place millions of years ago. The whole Second Republic era. There's a few other kind of settings that I have in general, some that I haven't worked on a lot. I'll go over a couple of them. There's this one called, I call it Krieg, partially. That's just kind of like an overall term I use for it. I try and give them titles. And let me describe this as Steampunk World War One. A Steampunk World War One kind of setting. And I don't really have any stories set in that. I just kind of have like a general kind of aesthetic overview, what's going on in it. Yeah. It's a very interesting kind of like, it's a very interesting setting that I've been working on. And then it kind of does actually go into World War II. As it goes into World War II, it becomes like less steampunk and more diesel punk, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of like another story I have. I have a continuation of like kind of like Second Republic stuff, but I don't really have a title for it. It's just like humans colonizing and becoming / discovering the old Atlassians and the old Atlassian like stuff. Yeah, it's just right stuff. There we go. Yeah, and they like come in, and like essentially the humans like come into contact with like the old like enemies of like the Atlassians. You know, we're talking like the old like Polarians and stuff, because the Polarians are still alive. And so they come to blows with them, and of course the Polarians are like, "Oh, you guys are Atlassians." The humans are like, "What the fuck is that?" You know, and it's kind of interesting, like them, like humans discovering what's going on and everything. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And there is another setting I could talk about, but I think I've talked about that setting extensively on my personal account, so that might actually dox me if I talk about that. So I probably should skip over that one. So yeah, just basically like these three are kind of like the main ones. I have a few other kind of general ones. Like I have a kind of like zombie apocalypse kind of setting. What other settings do I have? I have a lot of stuff like regarding like post-Atlassian civilizations and stuff. I have a lot of like settings like kind of in the same kind of setting as the Atlas sagas, but they're kind of continuations. They take place after the Fourth Republic falls. Because like I said, there's 4 Atlassian republics. Like the first, we talked about the first one a little bit. We talked a lot about the second one, and then the second one falls, and they move, and the Atlassians move again, and then they form the Third Republic, which is in the same kind of areas like Earth was, and in fact, the Atlassians colonize Earth before they leave again, because the Third Republic collapses, and that leads to the Fourth Republic being organized, which is the smallest and the weakest, and then they get essentially like threatened to be invaded by the Polarians, and they all spread out across the multiverse. And then I have like various different like Atlas Saga like stories like describing like, or settings like describing like the different Atlassian descended species, you know, not just humans, you know, what other like planets they resettled and how like they're coming along and everything, what they're doing, stuff like that, and how they eventually like fit into the story. It's a very large overarching plot that literally lasts like in universe probably over 1 billion years. Legitimately. Like we're at that level pretty much. Oh god, I'm not sure what else to talk about. How long have I been talking for? Only 1 hour and 18 minutes, man. To be fair though, this is actually kind of like exhausting just sitting here and talking about stuff. That's certainly a long time. To be fair, I've been working on this for like 7 or so years. I'm gonna say about 7 years now. So I've literally been building this. And do you want to know what? I never actually said where this originally came from. Where this whole idea came from. It came from a fan fiction. Because I used to write fan fiction. And I wrote this one fan fiction because I was weird. And I was like, I had the very original idea of like, oh, what if I had all these different characters from like all of these different anime that I like? What if they meet up and battle each other? I know, really original, right? But the thing is, out of that came like a lot of this DNA. Like a lot of like the idea of like a multiverse, a lot of the ideas of like the different like gods that inhabit the multiverse. And literally like I took that and I improved on it. And what actually ended up happening is I wrote my novel first. Or actually first I wrote the fan fiction. Then I moved on to actually writing like a novel. And then as I went on writing the novel, I began implementing these ideas. And I began taking these ideas and like putting them into like kind of different like scenarios. Like, okay, this happened. You know, what if we put this in there? And from there I began just building on it. And soon I had like different, not just different characters. I was like dealing with different like universes and stuff. And then I was coming up with like all these different like new gods. And I was coming up with like ancient races and stuff. And it's spiraled out of control until we've reached this point where I now have several different kinds of settings and several different like organizations and like characters and like all kinds of things going on. And the timeline lasts over like 1 billion years, technically trillions of years if we're counting the very first creation of the multiverse. And it's just like, how did we get here? How did I manage to get here? Multiverse stuff can get pretty wild, allows for all sorts of fun stuff. I think it really does. It really does, honestly. I mean, seriously, like, this multiverse I've been building literally has, like, it's like a combination of, like, sci-fi and fantasy and horror. Because, like, the sci-fi aspect, you know, there's a lot of, like, stuff based off of, like, Star Wars and Warhammer 40k and stuff. And then, like, the fantasy aspect, you know, you have, like, magic and stuff. You got a lot of stuff that's... I took inspiration from, like, not just, like, some fantasy anime I watched, but also, like, World of Warcraft. You know, a lot of World of Warcraft, actually. I took a lot of heavy inspiration from World of Warcraft. And then you have, like, you know, the horror stuff, like, based a lot off of, like, H.P. Lovecraft level kind of things. I have some Stephen King inspiration in there. I have, like... I'm pretty sure there's probably some Goosebumps DNA in there too, if you look hard enough, with some of the stuff I've made. But yeah, there's literally all kinds of stuff I've built in this multiverse. Oh, there's also like all kinds of like shorter, like smaller genres within it. Like the whole steampunk thing and the diesel punk thing. And I have like, you know, I have a fucking... Oh man, what was I gonna say? I have like kind of like a Western kind of setting. Hi, Necros. Thank you for Pornhub. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just kind of like rambling on about my multiverse a little bit because I kind of ran out of like stuff to specifically talk about, so I'm just kind of talking about how I came up with it and like kind of my inspirations and all that. But yeah, I've literally like been building this. If I add in like the whole fan fiction arc for it, I think you can probably be like, it would probably be like if I were to include the fan fiction era, it's probably been almost 10 years then since I've been started building this. It's the only port hub I may be getting for a while. Oh yeah. Oh. Oof. Oh yeah, that did happen. I forgot about that. Oof. I'm sorry to hear that, Necros. It's okay. It might be happening soon here too. So, oh well. Not sure if you said already because I had loud game audio cutting in a moment ago, but have you read any of Brandon Sanderson's works? He's been building what's called the Cosmere. No, I don't think I've ever. Let me get my phone out real quick because since I have Google Chrome pulled up here, like I don't want you guys to see my search history. You guys don't need to see that. Okay, so wait, what was the name? Wait, what was that No Man's Sky news? I'll look at that later because that looks concerning. Okay, Brandon Sanderson. No, I don't think I've ever heard of this guy. The Cosmere fictional universe, where most of his fantasy novels are set. Really? Whoa, what the fuck? He's got a handful of different series that are all intertwined. Yeah, that's pretty much like what I've been doing, actually. That's really cool. And these series literally have, like, several stories that... Oh my gosh. Wow, that's interesting, actually. Yeah, I might have to check that out. And a lot of these are that's really cool. Yeah, because that's pretty much what I've been doing for the most part. Like, I'll kind of like and it works because literally when you have a multiverse like this, you literally have like the capability where literally anything is possible. Anything can like kind of fit. You just got to find a place to put it, pretty much. The Mistborn series and Stormlight Archive series are my top 2 recommendations. Okay. Yeah, I've never actually heard of like his work before, but yeah, I might actually have to check it out. To be fair though, I don't really do a lot of reading anymore. I just mostly do a lot of just playing video games and kind of just sitting in my room spacing out. But yeah, anyway. But that's the thing you can do with like a lot of these Oh yeah, there is audiobooks. I've never actually listened to an audiobook. I might have to start doing that. I mean, shit, I have a whole span of time, like, where I'm in my car, like, almost every morning because I'm driving to work. That would probably be, like, the perfect time to start listening to an audiobook. Yeah, I could do that. That'd be a good idea, actually. I might have to do that. Yeah. I'll definitely, like, let me write it down. Let me write it down real quick. Actually, I'll just write it down on here. I'll just write it down here because I'll probably remember it this way. Audiobooks. Brandon Sanderson. Okay. Yeah, let's just write down on there so that way, like, I'll definitely remember it. Audible app is great. I think I might have Audible. It might have came pre-installed on my phone. I don't know. Folks that do the narrations for Brandon Sanderson's books are pretty good. Okay. Oh, no, not... Okay, another ad. Alright. But, yeah, pretty much, basically, this whole multiverse, like, I've really just been building. It legitimately is just... I'll have a random idea, and I'll find a way to fit it into the multiverse. And once I find a way to fit it into the multiverse, it generally works just because of how kind of divided it all is, you know? It's kind of how, like, divided the entire multiverse is. And because of that, it just kind of works. But yeah, like, you... Honestly, like, if you were to see one of my settings, like, let's talk about, like, these different settings here. Like, I talk about the Second Republic era. Would you be able to believe that this is connected to this, which is then also connected to this, which is also connected to, like, a few, like, horror stories I have? There's actually this one horror story I've always wanted to write. I never got around to writing it, so it's safe to talk about. But there's this horror story I had an idea for that took place in the 1950s. And it essentially took place in this fictional town I've like kind of made, called Sugar Creek, Indiana. Obviously, because I live in Indiana, so it's just like it seemed like pretty obvious. I know the setting enough to like kind of build a kind of like town or everything around that. And I kind of imagine like Sugar Creek, Indiana is kind of like the Indiana version of like Derry, Maine, or Gravity Falls, Oregon, where there's just a bunch of weird shit going on. And basically, I want to write this story where the military comes into this town and occupies it, and they like pretend it's a training exercise. But what it actually is let's scroll back up real quick because this is connected. Remember when I was talking about this, all this stuff? How they found a portal, an ancient portal in Shangri-La. Remember when I was talking about all this? Yeah, there's several of those portals. Basically, the ancient races built a lot of these portals on all the planets that they colonize. Never been to Indiana myself. I've heard it's nice. Oh yeah, you can find some... I mean, honestly, it's not really like... There's not really much exciting here, but you can find some like pretty nice outdoorsy kind of areas. You can find some nice... You can find some nice hiking trails and everything. I love hiking here. It's great. It's beautiful. But yeah, essentially all these different ancient races constructed portals in their temples when they came to these planets, and they used those portals to essentially like kind of travel between different planets and all that. And so because of that, they find all these kinds of things, literally. And so, basically, the entire point of that story was the military comes in and occupies this Indiana town called Sugar Creek because they find a portal there underneath the town in an old temple. And so, they open it up and shit goes bad, and basically the portal is just kind of like the source of like a bunch of weird shit happening in the town. Gonna be getting myself on some mountain trails tomorrow? Ooh, that sounds nice. We don't have mountains here, unfortunately. I would love to hike in some, though. But that was kind of like the whole premise of the story. And that was going to be kind of like the one that kind of started the, like, oh, these stories are connected. Because I envisioned one part where the main character of the story was going to, like, go into, like, one of the areas of, like, the research station that they set up around this portal. And he was going to find all these different artifacts. And the different artifacts he finds were going to be references to, like, the different stories and stuff. So, like, for, let's say, the steampunk, kind of World War I kind of thing I like, talked about earlier. The kind of setting I have. I was thinking, like, they would find, like, a helmet, like, that would resemble a World War I helmet, but was, you know, a little more, like, steampunk, I guess. And so that would like be like, okay, this little area, this like section of the multiverse is connected to like this section, you know. And then maybe they would find like an old like Atlassian artifact, and then maybe they would find like some kind of futuristic human tech or something, you know, like just stuff like that, just hints to like show people that everything is connected. They might not be in the same universe, but they exist in like the same multiverse. You know what I mean? I Washington State, the trails here like to murder your legs. Ooh. Honestly, I can believe it. But yeah, that was kind of like the idea I had for this story. I don't remember the title. the title was really weird and specific, so it'll probably hit me like later tonight while I'm trying to sleep or something. But yeah, that was kind of like the whole idea I had for that story. I've had ideas for several stories. I had an idea for like one story taking place on that one Old West planet I mentioned earlier, because I have an Old West planet, where essentially like after like it's resettled by the Alishans after the collapse of the Fourth Republic, essentially there's a outbreak of, let's see, where did I mention it back here? The corruption, yeah. Where basically like the corruption found its way to that planet, and one of the like the main character was like gonna have to fight it all by himself pretty much, and the tech that was gonna like have in the story was going to be like tech we would have in the Old West time period. So we're talking like steam engines, like lever action, stuff like that, but they would have their own kind of unique charm to them. They'd have their own like unique kind of like appearances and everything, because obviously it's a completely different world. The guns are built for a completely different kind of, environment and everything. So obviously they're not gonna like resemble the ones we have on Earth and stuff. But that was kind of like the idea I was running with. That's one of the best ideas having bedtime. Oh, there was another story I want to talk about. There was another one I want to talk about that was similar to that, and now I gotta try and remember it. Now I gotta try and remember it because I don't remember it. There was this one horror story idea I had where like humans were going outside of the we're starting to like kind of get outside the solar system, and they went to the Kuiper Belt, like like Pluto and like the different like dwarf planets and stuff out there, and they begin finding like the ancient temples and stuff that you see in like that I mentioned earlier, but instead like they're actually infected with some kind of like strange virus, and they've essentially kind of been effectively quarantined. But keep in mind, these are very, very ancient temples, millions of years old. And so yeah, kind of like an outbreak happens. It's kind of like it was kind of like Dead Space in a way. It kind of turned into Dead Space. So that's probably why I never ended up writing it, because it kind of turned into Dead Space. But yeah, I have so many like cool ideas for stories that I mostly just keep in my head. And that's kind of why I'm putting these out there. That's why I kind of started like making these streams, so I can like get these ideas out at least, and that way there's a place for them to be collected, and there's a place where I can like just talk about them, and I can talk about my creative process and the whole just idea of like this multiverse I've been building. It just kind of sucks because I can't talk about like one of the stories, because I literally got it published, like I said before, and it'll dox me if I talk about it. Oh man, although to be fair, it probably isn't super duper original or anything, but still. Start voicing them to kickstart actually putting it in a paper? I guess you could call it that. To be fair, during my debut, I said I wanted to write a book as a VTuber. What's a little doxing? Well, I mean, I guess, to be fair, technically, it wouldn't be like a super big deal. It would just mostly connect to my personal account. But the thing is, I just prefer to keep them separate. So, yeah. It wouldn't, like, dox my address or anything. Like, I didn't hide the address anywhere in it. Don't actually tell us, please. My address is actually... Nah, I won't. I won't. I don't know, maybe like someday, maybe someday I would actually like find some way to like just like do it. I don't know, without actually like doing it, if that makes sense, kind of like hinting at it or something. I don't know. But yeah, no, I just prefer to keep it a little. That's something I'd prefer to keep just separate. Mostly because, well, on the one hand, I prefer to just keep my VTuber and PL stuff separate, because they're two completely different types of content. And two, no, actually, I don't really think there is a two. I think that's about it. I think that's about it. But anyway, okay, do I have anything else to really talk about? I don't think so. I think I kind of like swept through my whole reserve there of like what I want to talk about for the night. So I'll probably have some stuff to talk about next week, or at least I'll think about some stuff to talk about next week. Do I want to end it off here? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like just sit here and like just talk about just random nothings for like an hour or so. Yeah, we'll probably just go ahead and end off here. Let me go to my chatting screen here. There we go. And let me save that real quick. I don't want to lose any of that progress. Random can be fun though. That is true. That is very true. But yeah, I just kind of ran out. I just kind of ran out of stuff to talk about. I think that's about all I had in my reserve. All the stuff I talked about today. To be fair, I actually went over like I think like I found like 10 more minutes of stuff to talk about. So I guess maybe that wasn't too bad. Oh, okay. You know what? Actually, I guess there is one thing we could do. I don't think this is connected kind of like to the whole lore kind of stuff, but I actually do have some like old figure like kind of like original like kind of designs and stuff for Malphas, like my kind, obviously me, my OC, that I can show on screen. I guess I can talk about that. Kind of show you the original idea. It's funny because it was made by my best friend in Hero Forge. I essentially told him the whole idea for Malphas, and he kind of just made... Oh my god, I got the hiccups now. He kind of just made it and sent it to me, and I was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, that looks pretty cool. We'll, like, base the character off of this. Oh my god, why do I have to have the hiccups now? Okay. Yeah, okay, let's put this in. Ooh, that's big. So here is kind of like the first... Here's kind of the original design for Malphas. This is actually what the entire character is based off of. Like, this design. So you can see, like, this was kind of meant to be kind of a semi-futuristic thing, but I think he went for more of a kind of traditional, more cowboy look with it. Yeah, you can see, like, there's a few, like, differences here. Like, for one thing, the hair's a little longer. You can tell, like, back there. You probably can't see my cursor, but you can tell, like, in the back there, like, the hair goes on a little longer. The gun is a little more... Because I actually do have a gun. Let me bring it up on screen here. Let me, like, get... Yeah, you can see, here's the gun I have. So, I love this gun. This gun's great. But, like, the original one looked like this. This was the original gun. It was supposed to be kind of futuristic, but obviously it didn't turn out that way. I think Hero Forge was kind of limited at that time. But this was pretty much the basic... Also, the goatee. There's a goatee. He had a goatee. And that's actually funny because in the stories... In the story I have with Malphas... Malphas has a beard. Malphas actually has a beard, not a goatee. So yeah, there's some differences. There's definitely like a lot of differences between the different versions of Malphas and everything. There is actually like another like version too. There's another like version of like the Hero Forge figure too. Let me remove that and let me bring this one up. This one's actually transparent for some fucking reason. But this is the same character design, obviously. This is where the wings come from. Crow-like wings, because I have wings, obviously. I rarely ever bring them out, but I do have them. And so this is where like kind of like the wings come from. They were meant to be more crow-like, and basically the idea of that was basically if you look into like the kind of demonology surrounding Malphas, he can turn into a raven. And when I kind of like adopted the idea of the character and essentially turned into my own kind of character, I was like, well, instead of a raven, what if we made it a crow? What if we instead made it a crow? And what are crows associated with? The Old West, or like just the West in general. So that's where the idea for the Cowboy Fallen Angel part came in. So yeah, you can see there's a few like differences here. Again, you can see the hair's a little longer. There's actually horns. You can barely see them, but there's some horns there. I don't really like the horns too much, so I decided not really to go through with them. But yeah, those are pretty much like the early Malphas designs. These are like what the these are what like literally the VTuber model was based off of. Let me put my wings away. Dual wielding always wins, yeah. Actually, to be fair, I actually am technically dual wielding. Like because I got my pistol here, and I got the other gun. So technically, I do dual wield. And to be honestly, this gun. Let me remove the picture out of the way. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this gun. I think this was completely made by my model like artists. I think this was made up by them. We get to see below the belt. Yeah. But yeah, I think they came up with this design all on their own because I didn't provide anything for it, and I actually just noticed it pulsates. I just noticed the energy. I literally just noticed that. I didn't know it did that. Keep in mind, I've had this model for over a year now. I just noticed that. Oof. And then, I have the revolver in the other hand. So, yeah. Really interesting. Yeah, literally, an entire year of using this model, I just noticed the gun's animated. An entire year of not even knowing that my gun was fucking animated this whole time. That would actually probably explain a lot of why VTube Studio takes up so much like CPU space whenever it's running. That would actually probably make a lot of sense. Although to be fair, it probably is just CPU intensive in general. Okay, I think that's about all I have for tonight. Let's see who all is online and who all is streaming that I can raid. Live 2D is more CPU intensive than 3D. Okay. Alright. That feels weird, though. That feels really weird, though. Because if you would think a live 2D model wouldn't take up as much space, at least when compared to a 3D model, that feels weird. I don't know why. That feels really, really weird. You would think the 3D model would be more CPU intensive. I don't know, maybe I just need to get a 3D model. Maybe that's what I need to do. You know what? Actually, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. To be fair, the program is calculating transformations of the otherwise still image. You know what? That actually makes a lot of sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. I can get behind that reason. That's solid reasoning. Who am I gonna raid? I don't think there really is. I guess. Do I want to raid somebody new, or do I want to raid somebody I've already raided before? VTuber modeling is all over my head. I work on cars. Yeah, honestly, both of those things go over my head. I just DM'd the guy on Etsy. I just paid them money, and they just made the model. I don't know what went into the model making process or anything like that. Oh wait,
Another
Duke and Maverick. I don't think I've ever rated Duke before, and they're one of the they're Cowboy VTuber too. Yeah, honestly, I think I've never rated them before, so that might be a good idea to rate them actually. Oh, we got another ad break. Okay, I'll wait. I'll wait a moment before we raid anybody. Let's see, what does this say? My job I'll be starting this month will have me working on Navy ships. Really? Interesting, actually. But yeah, like I said, I've never raided Duke before, so I think this might actually be like a good idea. Might be like an interesting opportunity. So yeah, honestly, do I follow this person on Twitter? Let me see. I follow them on Twitch, so it actually would make sense if I followed them on Twitter. Yeah, I follow them on Twitter. Okay, I wanted to make sure. Actually, like all the other Cowboy VTubers follow Duke on Twitter. Okay. All right, yeah, we're gonna go raid Duke tonight. I've never raided them before, so this will be a good opportunity. This will be a really good opportunity, I guess, to meet a cowfolk that I've never actually interacted with before. So yeah, let's go raid Duke and Maverick. All right. So, thank you everybody so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you everybody for listening to me ramble. You know, I really appreciate it. It's always fun to sit down and talk, especially about like the universe I've been building. I will see you all again Thursday whenever I play what am I playing? Or Doom. Okay, Doom. Yeah, I'll see you all Thursday when I play Doom. As always, have a good one.